Hi, I'm Casey Vanous, and I'm excited to be here with you today to share one of my favorite recipes with you. It's one that I learned from a friend growing up. Her grandparents had made it, so it's literally something that we recreate in our kitchen at home based on the memories that I have of the dish, because we didn't ever have a recipe for it. So today I just want to show you a lineup of some of the products that we'll be using. I really love the Trader Joe's tomato basil marinara, but you can use whatever plant-based marinara sauce that you want to use. We have some diced tomatoes over here, and we'll also be using some kidney and some white beans. You can use whatever you have on hand. Today I've chosen 2 cans of the kidney beans and 1 can of the white beans. And we're going to start, as most of my recipes do, with some onion and bell pepper that is chopped up so that we can saute it with a little bit of garlic to kind of get the base going. So we'll start with that first. I'm going to use a little bit of olive oil while I start the saute, but if you want to just use vegetable broth or water to start your saute, that's completely appropriate as well. So let me get the stove going here. And then I need to light the right burner. So you can just put it on probably medium-high just to get started. I add a little bit of oil to get it going. And I'll tell you a little bit about why nutrition is so important to me and my family as well. So when you get that going, you just want to add your onion and bell peppers. So today I've chopped up 1 large white onion. I usually use white or sweet onion when I'm making this, and I just dice it and I put it into the oil or the broth or water, depending on how you want to saute it. And then today we're using yellow, red, and green pepper. I really love the way the bell pepper flavor comes out when you mix it with tomato sauce. It gives a really nice kind of sweet flavor. So I'll add those to the onions so that we can saute them. I'll also add a little bit of garlic, but garlic can get bitter if you have it on the stovetop too long. So I usually add that just maybe 2 minutes before the sauteing is done for the onions and bell peppers so that it doesn't get bitter. And we will also be having, as part of this dish, it's called pasta fazool. I don't know if I told you that already. Noodles is part of the dish. So typically when I'm making this to bolster the protein content, I will use the yellow box of Barilla pasta. They've done a really nice job of reformulating. It used to have egg whites in it, but now it is plant-based, and it gives a significant amount of protein and fiber per serving. So that's a really nice thing to add to your dish to increase the protein content. But given that we have the COVID pandemic, I couldn't find that at the market this week, so we'll be using some vegetable farfalle pasta. So as you can see, I have the water boiling over here for the pasta. So I'm just going to dump that in and set the timer. So we'll know when it's done. And while the vegetables are sauteing, I'll start to get my garlic prepped up. And one of the reasons that nutrition is so important to me, my mom read a lot about nutrition when she was pregnant. I have 2 sisters, and she was really into eating a healthy diet to have a healthy pregnancy and have a healthy baby, and that translated into her actually she cooked a lot of healthy food for us growing up, but she really made everything from scratch. So I grew up in Vermont, and we had 2 acres of gardens every year. She was a teacher, so she had summers off. So she would actually grow a lot of our food. We grew 1 whole garden of tomatoes, 1 whole garden of potatoes, and then we had mixed vegetable garden that had radishes and peas and string beans, broccoli, garlic, onions, tomatoes, you name it, zucchini, cucumbers. We had it all. Sometimes we made watermelon. We had a lot of heirloom seeds that we could get in Vermont at the time, so we had a lot of really nice food. And as someone who is very interested in nutrition, as a scientist also, if you read the literature on children's nutrition, nutrition is so important in childhood because what you feed children determines their preference for life. So if you feed them vegetables and fruits and other things that are healthy for them, that will cultivate their preference for those foods. So when they grow up, they're going to be saying, I need my salad, or I want my vegetables, or whatever it is that they're accustomed to eating. So we really have an opportunity when children are young to shape those tastes in a way that will benefit them on their lifelong healthy journey. So it's another thing that's dear to me because my children are 8 and 4, and we eat beans pretty much every day, and I'm really proud of the fact that they love vegetables, they love beans, and they are looking for these types of food and ask me to pack them when we go on trips and such. So It's a wonderful opportunity if you have young children to really expose them to foods that are nourishing and really good for them and will help them in their lifelong journey. So I'm just going to give my pasta a little stir here. So usually what I look for when I'm sauteing the vegetables is you kind of want the onions to get a little bit translucent looking. And that will tell you that they're almost done before you add your sauces and such. If any of you ever make soups, I actually was a TA for Food Science Lab when I was in graduate school. And a really interesting thing that I learned is that certain vegetables will not cook if you have tomatoes in the broth because they form something called insoluble calcium pectate. So if you're experimenting with foods at home and you're finding that you're making a vegetable soup and you put the tomatoes in at the beginning, things like carrots may not soften very quickly or at all because those acids interfere with that. So I always tell people, make sure you get your vegetables to the amount of doneness that you want before you add your tomato products. So I'm just going to give those a stir so they don't stick. And usually when I saute, depending on how much you're making, it's always really nice to actually put your beans in with your vegetables. You can put herbs in now too because it'll help the beans kind of take up the flavors of the onions and other things that you add to your saute. So I'm just going to grab my garlic now so that I can put that in with the onions since they're cooking along nicely. And I learned that about garlic from a girl that I worked with, a girl from Italy, when I worked with her between undergrad and grad school. So she and her father came over to my house one day to teach me how to make gravy. Of course, gravy to them is tomato sauce, and I love tomato sauce because we grew up with it, because my mom canned tomatoes, and there's nothing like homemade canned tomatoes. But she was the one that taught me you don't put the garlic in until like the last minute or two, just because it can get bitter. Use that tip at home too. And for those of you, if you don't have fresh garlic, so I love to cook. I don't use a lot of recipes for cooking. You do have to kind of use them more for baking because things are more precise, like baking soda and other things that you have going on. When I cook, I think of a recipe as a suggestion, so things can always be tailored to your palate. So don't be afraid to experiment with things. My mom always said that my dad was a great cook, and it's because he wasn't afraid to take any risks. So my mom asks me a lot for recipes of things, and I don't really have them because I just kind of add the seasonings and I taste things as I go, and then depending on what it tastes like, I'll add a little bit more. Like for black beans, I always love to use cumin, garlic, parsley, salt. Some of you may be watching your sodium, so you can stick with garlic powder if you don't want to have as much salt, but this is one of my staples. I don't usually add any salt when I'm cooking because I do use this quite a bit. So today, we are using tomato sauce in season, but you can also add a little oregano and basil to your recipe, or if you like Italian seasoning, you can add that too. And my husband really likes spicy stuff, so when I serve his, I'll put a little bit of red chili pepper on top. So if you like spicy, you can also incorporate that into how you serve the product. So our vegetables, as you can see, are sauteing up nicely. Can you see the onions are starting to get a little bit translucent? That means that we're about ready to add our sauces. So you can also, if you don't like your stuff cooked as much, you can also leave it if you like to have a little bite in your pepper or your onion. You can also cook it a little bit and it'll retain a little bit more of that firmness when you go to serve it. So it all depends on what you like. So, and you can also, you'll see with this dish, depending on who I'm serving it to, if there are children whose palates I don't know, I'll keep the noodles separate so they can kind of add as much of the tomato and bean sauce as they like. If it's just for our family, I mix the whole thing together and I call it like a casserole in a pot because it's got everything, all that you need for a meal all in one. So I'm going to go over here and grab the beans quickly and bring them back. So this is where I was saying you can always saute your beans a little bit in with the onions and peppers because it will help them to pick up a little bit of that flavor. And that's also a really good time to add some of your seasonings. So for this recipe, I probably add 2 teaspoons of garlic parsley salt. You can use garlic powder if you want, and maybe half a teaspoon of basil and half a teaspoon of oregano, just to build on the savory flavors. So I like to add each of those, and then you can give it a stir. And I have the heat on medium. So you can let that saute for just a second. We'll check the time on our noodles. Looks like we still have about 4.5 minutes left. So once the timer goes, I'll pull those just because I like my noodles al dente. So you want to cook them to whatever temperature you like to have. So, and Dr. David Heber is someone who is very widely known around the globe for nutrition too, and he wrote a book many years back, What Color is Your Diet? And so I love these types of meals because, as you can see, we've picked green and orange and yellow peppers, but we also have red beans and white beans, and we have white onions, and there are just so many nutritional properties of these plants that are good for us. Even onions are white, but actually the pigment that makes onions white is a potent antioxidant, just like the pigment, like the anthocyanins in blueberries that are making blueberries that superfood for you. White vegetables like garlic and onions also have antioxidant pigments that are really good for your health. So when you look and see that you have so many colors coming into your meal, you know that it's actually really balanced, and it's really nourishing. It's not the typical beige diet. So now I'm going to add my diced tomatoes in the tomato sauce. So I have this, Trader Joe's has a lot of organic products. You might not have Trader Joe's where you live, but you can get something similar. And add that. And then I add the tomato sauce as well. If I can get the jar open. Oh, thank you, Jesus, because I can't always get them by myself. And I just dump it right in. And my family really likes the tomato basil from Trader Joe's. It's a really nice, simple, clean sauce. If you like something a little bit more acidic, the Rayo's is really good too. We do use that as well here, but it is a little bit more acidic, so it's if you like to have your tomato products more acidic. I usually start with about 1.5 jars and just see if it has as much sauce as I want, and then I'll add more if I feel like it needs it. So just kind of give it a stir, get everything warm. All the nice colors come together, and I always love how the tomatoes have that velvety sheen too. So this is where you can put your lid on to help it heat up a little bit. We'll just give it a few minutes, and we'll check on our noodles here. It looks like they'll be done pretty soon. So you could also serve this if you wanted. Often we just eat this as a meal because it does have everything that you need. It's got your beans and your vegetables, tomatoes, and you'll have your carbohydrates over here, the noodles, but you can always complement it if you'd like with a simple salad. One of the salads that my family likes is I just chop up tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, and then my husband likes onions too, and I just dice them up. And then I make a balsamic vinaigrette where I just put in balsamic vinegar. You can add oil if you want to, but you don't have to. You can add water instead of oil. And then I just add a little bit of mustard and some garlic parsley salt and salt and pepper, and that's it. And I just give it a shake, and we drizzle that over the vegetables, and it's a nice side to go with this dish too, because my husband and I were talking about it. This is a very hearty dish, but you'll notice with plant-based cooking, things can be very hearty, but they're not too rich. And it's really nice to have that distinction, because I know a lot of people who may cook with a lot of butter or sour cream, and the meals are very heavy. And if you've ever eaten anything like that, you might remember you don't always feel good afterwards. But when you eat these types of meals, you definitely will be full, but you won't have that sick feeling afterwards, which I am very sensitive towards. So it looks like we're about ready to have our noodles ready here. So I'm going to get ready with my towel so that I can strain them out. We went back to Vermont and New Hampshire year before last. We couldn't go last year, of course, because of COVID, but we went to the King Arthur flower shop and got some kind of whimsical towels that have roosters on them. So I think of my trip back home every time I'm using them. So I'll take my noodles here. I'm just going to dump them out. And I don't usually rinse the noodles just because the sauce will stick better if you don't rinse them. So I just kind of shake those out. And then what I do is, you can keep them on the side like I mentioned, or you can stir them into the pasta. So since I typically stir them into the pasta, I'll show you that preparation. I can see from our pan here that our sauce is nice and hot. So as you'll notice, this is also a very quick meal that is on the table quickly, which is a wonderful thing at our house because I work and my children are in school. And so I like something that can be on the table, ideally in 20 minutes. And as you can see, this fits the bill. So I'm going to add the noodles to this pot. Give it a stir. And I really like fresh herbs, so I will put some fresh parsley on top. And for parsley, I usually use about a quarter of a cup, but you could use as much as you like. And then when you serve this, you can serve it with extra parsley on top if you like. If you like vegan cheese, you can sprinkle that on top. You can serve it with crusty bread. You know, if it's a cold night and you want something a little bit more hearty, you can really serve it with anything you like. Or if it's an afternoon lunch and you want something lighter, you can also add that salad I was mentioning. So it has a lot of options, but as you'll see here, we see lots of colors. We've got our protein and vegetables, so it's really a meal all in one. And then I have the parsley that I had chopped up over here. I probably have closer to half of a cup, but use as much as you like. Parsley is really good for cleansing and fluid balance. It helps your kidneys too. So it's a good one to incorporate into your meals. And I think once you get that stirred in, it's pretty much ready to go. So I hope that you also are able to make some pasta fazool, as it was called, and that you and your families enjoy it as much as mine do. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed being able to share this favorite meal with all of you.